And once we've done that, we can actually automate the process so that depending on how your organisation wants to run, we can either automatically deprovision something that is in conflict with what a member of staff shouldn't have or should have, or we can flag it to an owner within the business who will then review it to ascertain whether it is actually something that that user should have or not. And then final stage of this is it's all captured within a database, it's all there. We've got full audit trail in terms of who did what, who certified what, and also the access that each user had at a given point of time. Very useful for organisations that may have had an incident that needs to go back 3 months or 6 months to identify what access rights were in place for an individual that might have been involved. This slide really just shows you how Identity Manager and Oracle Identity Analytics work together for completion of segregation of duty, checking and enforcement. What typically happens is that the request will come into the provisioning tool for new access, and the provisioning tool, the Identity Manager, will then refer that to the Identity Analytics tool to check to see if that new access entitlement is going to conflict with any of our policies within the business. If it's absolutely fine, there's no conflict, the provisioning tool will go ahead and provision that access in accordance with the process that we've agreed. However, if there is a conflict in terms of provisioning, in terms of segregation of duty conflict, then that will then be flagged by the analytics tool and go into either a queue to be resolved by a manager or somebody, or if you're feeling particularly strict within your organisation, it basically just blocks that access going through. So once we've brought into play roles, we can better manage the life cycle of an individual within our organisation. So when they start, we can give them a role, and we know that the access entitlements attached to that role are accurate because we've checked that they're accurate. This makes life a lot easier for IT. It makes it a lot easier for the manager as well, because the manager, it's easier to say what somebody does rather than what they should have access to. And it's also easier during the life cycle of somebody working in our organisation. Andras mentioned earlier, one of the key challenges that we have is that we're very good when people start in our organisation. We can normally find them all the stuff that they need to work for us. We're slightly less good when they leave our organisation in terms of we don't always terminate all of their access rights at the right time. And we're quite bad quite often at managing their change within our organisation between different roles. Quite often users within an organisation will start accumulating access rights within the business, and that could represent a significant risk to our organisation. And the final stage really is the analytics and the reporting and the dashboard capability. We actually provide 110 reports as standard out of the box, so it gives you quite a bit to get started on. It's very easy to customize additional reports as you need it. And something that our clients do, which they find very useful, is that they sit down with their external auditors as part of the management report specification, ask them what information they want to see, and then they configure the tool so that they have a section of reports that come down specifically at the time of the external auditor. So when the auditor's on site, they automatically go and review the data that they've already said in advance they would like to see in order to demonstrate that the correct access controls are in place. So that's useful in terms of reducing the amount of time that you spend with auditors and also the amount of time that they spend on site. Now, the case study that I have for you is a major European bank. Andras showed you a case study earlier, and that customer completed all 5 phases that I showed you earlier. This is an example of a customer who has actually only done the first 2 phases at the moment. But the level of complexity within their organisation is quite substantial, as you can see from the background description. They have 90,000 staff, about over 1 million accounts, 1,057 applications, all sorts of servers and databases, and they also had systems running on Unix, Wintel, and databases from various different organisations. So what they were struggling with was actually proving compliance initially to Sarbanes-Oxley. And the team that were working on this within IT were actually managing 3.8 million events a year in order to prove that access controls were in place and segregation of duty was being done. Now, from their point of view, they weren't coping very well, and they couldn't prove that Sarbanes-Oxley was being complied with because they couldn't respond fast enough. They used the Sun Role Manager solution, which is obviously now Oracle Identity Analytics, and these results here are actually their statistics, not mine. So they reduced their 3.8 million events a year down to 26,000 just by automating access certification and segregation of duty checking. Their annual cost reduction, again, their number, not mine, is 3.7 million euros, which actually means that their project paid for itself within 5 months. Now, it's a fairly extreme example, but as it's a very large organisation, but 90% of their SOX compliant applications were certified within a week, and all of them were completed within 2 months. And as a result of putting this in, they've actually now reduced a 3-month manual process to one that takes them less than 2 weeks. So there are benefits in terms of efficiency as well as cost effectiveness. The other areas in addition to the benefits of role management and identity compliance are really around operational efficiency. Increasingly, customers who haven't adopted a provisioning solution or an access management solution are now looking at maybe doing role management or identity compliance first in order to prepare themselves for a later provisioning project or program. And this approach quite often helps because you can normally get a faster return on investment to secure additional funding from the board for wider programs. Also help you with improved security because you know who has access to what, it has been certified. And another benefit of this, which isn't always apparent, is once you've actually gone through and certified all of the access entitlements, then you actually also have a very clear view of who actually needs licensing on different applications. And one benefit from this particular process is that quite often organisations can reduce their licensing costs because they've certified that 2,000 people should have access to the application and they're licensing 3,000. Protection from threats, I think we've probably covered off. I think that's fairly self-evident. If you're enforcing the concept of least privilege, i.e. you get the access entitlements you need to do your job and no more, then in theory we're mitigating risk from potential internal incidents. And the other one, which is becoming more significant, I think, is goodwill and reputation. I think all organisations are now working much more closely with suppliers, customers, partners, and those organisations want reassurance that we're actually adopting a strong compliance regime within our own organisation so that if we are sharing data, that we can be confident that that data is going to be protected properly by that partner or supplier organisation. Now, this is the combined Sun and Oracle identity stack. Now, Ian is going to cover this later, so I'm not going to go into detail on this. You can see the Oracle Identity Analytics product here, which is what I've been talking about for the last 25 minutes or so. But we will cover this in a lot more detail. So, coming back to my earlier statement at the beginning of the presentation, the main reasons for adopting role management or identity compliance are going to be around reducing the costs associated with access administration, reducing the cost in achieving and proving compliance, or proving to an organisation or auditors that you can be trusted with data. And really, if those aren't relevant to what you're doing, it's likely that you'll struggle to get the project off the ground because it may well not be relevant to your organisation. If you'd like further information, it's available on the Oracle website.